Everything, every form is an energy form. Every thought is an energy form. The table is an energy form. Just looks solid, it isn't. It was an amazing realization from physics. It's 99% empty space, but it looks solid. Same as the body. 99.999% empty space. So the pain body is energy, an energy form. One could say almost like a little entity made up of emotion, an emotional entity. I saw in a film recently a character that got closest to what the human pain body looks like. And it's in the film Lord of the Rings. A little being, I can't remember the name. Gollum. Yes. It's very well done. Sometimes when you look into his eyes, you see there's a being hiding in there. There's a sweet being hiding in there somewhere. And just the same, the pain body is energy, life energy. Trapped, that's all. Created by the ego, by thousands of years of living through an illusory sense of self and creating a reality on the basis of that illusion. Living in a world of enemies, because that's the ego's world. Creating enemies wherever you go, not being able to live without them. Making the whole world appear hostile towards you, having to fear every little thing. Of course, that creates a lot of pain. And even though presence may be arising in you, and in all of you it is, you may still find yourself being taken over by that thing when it wakes up from its dormant stage. Might be dormant for a week or 2 or 3 or 4. And then at some point it wants to experience more pain. It wakes up. And then it tries to find out what's going on in your life right now. It looks for an opening where it can go into your mind. And so that could be a slight upset with something while you're driving. Traffic, a driver cuts across and there's a slight, oh. And at that moment the pain body uses that as an opening and flows into that little upset. And then before you know it, the little upset has developed into a stream of negative thinking about the world and in general and yourself and other people and the stupidity of them all. And before you know it, the little thing has grown into a huge field of heavy negative energy. Oh, that's the pain body. It was waiting for it. And of course, pain bodies help each other. So the driver who cut across you was probably possessed by his pain body. So I'm going to show him. The phenomenon that's called road rage, where 2 drivers stop their cars and start attacking each other physically, means when 2 active pain bodies happen to meet on the road, that can happen. Not only 2 active pain bodies, but 2 active pain bodies in 2 humans in whom not the slightest trace of presence has yet arisen. They are totally identified with that. And they can't help it. They're driven to it. So the pain body becomes part of the self. It amplifies the already heavy and dysfunctional self, even without the influx of the heavy past emotion that is in the pain body. So even at the best of times, there's a heaviness, there's that sense of self, of me. But that becomes amplified through the old emotion of the pain body. It uses the structures, the mind structures of the egoic self, and flows into them, and then they become, it's like putting higher voltage into the heaviness of the ego and the dysfunction of it. You just plug it into. And so the other have all the egoic structures plus an enormous amount of emotion, raw, needing desperately to experience some more drama or pain, wanting more pain. One way of looking at that is in human beings the addiction to emotional pain. That's the pain body. And if you ever discover that in yourself, that at that moment you're loving it, indulging in negative thinking, for example, which is one way in which the pain body renews itself, feeding on your thinking, your thought. Every thought feeds it. And the emotion fuels the negative thinking. The thinking feeds the emotion fuels the thinking feeds the emotion. Vicious circle. Can go on, and it's great. Then at that moment you don't want to get out of your pain. So if the pain body may be feeding on your thinking, maybe feeding on other people's reactions, and at that moment you don't want anything else. You want that because you are the pain body at that moment. There's an addiction to emotional pain. So if you get drawn into a stream of negative thinking about life, about other people, about yourself, about whatever it may be, or one person, which could be yourself or your partner or your father or some politician. Not mentioning any names. And whenever the image of that person comes into your head, there's an enormous influx of pain. But again, we could easily misinterpret the pain body as being personal, and as unconsciousness being a personal shortcoming of someone. But all that, if it's a politician or your partner or whatever, but all that is there is the expression of human unconsciousness and the pain body. Wonderfully expressed in the words of Jesus, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." Or in the modern translation that hasn't been published yet, "They are completely unconscious." And when that is the case, they create suffering. And when you react as if there were a person there who knows what he is doing, you also become unconscious. The reaction can make you unconscious. The reaction can take you over. And then your own pain body suddenly is there. And the pain body contributes to the fact that many people believe there's something wrong with them. And there isn't. It's the human pain body. And the heavier it is in you, because people have varying degrees of density in their pain body, the more likely it is that it'll drive you into consciousness, because the pain gets too much. I can't live like that anymore. And then suddenly you notice it when it arises. The first sign of it you may be able to catch. A little event triggering an enormous reaction. Oh, what's that? And you notice that emotional movement inside you. You're present. What then happens? We don't know. The pain body may still arise, depending on your degree of presence. A strange thing happens when the pain body comes up. It uses an opportunity. We mentioned the car. Could be your partner who makes a remark or comment that the pain body can use as an opportunity to arise. What did you mean when you said that? Were you accusing me? Why are you accusing me? The partner says, I wasn't accusing you of any. Yes, you were accusing. And to observe it then, as it arises. Whether you can do that depends on your degree of presence. And it's quite possible that you can detect it. For most people, it works like this. They become conscious just after it's happened. A pain body episode has happened. The pain body came up, a drama developed, perhaps with your partner or at work, or some other member of your family, or even with a stranger. Drama developed. There was perhaps a lot of shouting and fighting, and then pain body fed itself on the emotional pain and then subsided and went back to its dormant state. And then some consciousness comes back. What was that? What was all that about? Sometimes partners can do it. After the drama, they can both say, what was all that about? And then you think, how did it start? We can't even remember what the whole thing was about. In some cases, they can't even remember how it all started. It was about nothing in many cases. Much ado about nothing, Shakespeare's play. And then they become conscious, there was our pain body, or there was my pain body. That was it, okay. Well, let's see if next time we can catch it a little bit sooner. And then usually it arises in one person before it triggers the reaction in the other. So it can sometimes happen that one partner remains conscious and observes the arising of the pain body in the other. And then perhaps can either point it out, or if that's too dangerous, can simply be intensely present in the body and simply be there as an aware presence, a non-reacting presence. But that requires great intensity of presence, because the pain body is clever, very clever. It knows the weak points where you're most likely to react. Or if you think it's all too much for you, you can quietly walk out of the room. But who knows what happens after that. Of course, as you know, it's easier to see it in others than in yourself. And if you're genuinely present and say, there's your pain body, it's starting, the other person may become conscious at that moment and say, yeah, you're right. Or the pain body may already have taken possession of their thoughts, and so the person can no longer see it. And a pain body then will never admit that he or she is the pain body, of course. If you ask, are you the pain body? They would not admit to it. But they would probably tell you that you are the pain body. Or throw something at you. Or deny the whole thing. All that nonsense about pain body. So pain body is a great challenge it is not personal. It does not mean there's something wrong with you. Usually, as presence arises, the gap between the ending of a pain body episode and the arising of conscious presence, when you recognize what has happened, gets shorter and shorter. At first you might need an hour or two after an episode, and then, or even a day, and then you look back what happened yesterday. Oh, that was. And then that shortens, and then you may be able to be present either when it's not yet, either has not fully arisen yet in its very early stages that of an emotional reaction trying to move into your mind, and you may be able to catch it there and watch it. May be able to catch it as it begins to subside. The episode is coming to an end, and gradually you're getting tired of the drama. It's exhausting, of course. And in that moment, pain body is still partly there. You catch it and say, oh, I can still feel it. There it is. It also happens very frequently that the pain body, when it needs to feed on more pain, comes up, and you are there, very present, very alert, and you see it. So it meets the light of presence. And usually it may stick around for a little while to see if it can get through there somewhere. Presence, by the way, is not holding it down. Presence never exerts any effort on anything. It never resists anything. Presence never holds the pain body down in any way. That is a dangerous thing. One could do that through willpower. I have no negative emotion because I'm spiritually advanced. I'm just not seeing them. I'm just not, they don't exist. And of course then they'll come out where you, in very strange ways. So you cannot hold the pain body down. You can for a short while, and then it'll come up in strangest ways, and you do the weirdest things, including physical violence, or you inflict cruelty on people and don't even know it. Or you make your body very ill. If the pain body has no other outlet, it can become very destructive. An unexpressed emotion churning around you for years. So presence never pushes it down. It's simply a light into which it comes, that's all. The light of presence, the light of awareness, the light of consciousness. The pain body comes into the light. And the strange thing is, it doesn't like the light. So it will either try to obscure the light so that it can continue to pretend to be you. It can take you over and become you for a while and live through you. The emotion wants to live again through you. Another form of reincarnation. The emotion wants to live again through you. It wants to relive what it already knows, what it makes up its energy field. And so it cannot do that when there's presence. You are actually there as the consciousness that watches. Then it can't do it. So it may, for a while, it'll try. You can see it comes up, the little entity, and there's a light shining on it. And then it may try again, coming up, and you still just watch it. And then it tends to shrink back into a little dark corner. It waits for a better opportunity. It's fine. This is how consciousness works. It doesn't mean you're now totally free of pain body. Just at that moment, it's gone down. You're too conscious. Can't come. In the evening, perhaps it'll find a better opportunity. When you lose consciousness through watching a certain politician on TV, or your partner comes home late from work. Where have you been? Some upset happens. One drink too many. And there's his chance or her chance. in males, there are quite a few, I don't know the percentage of the population, it is frequently happens that in certain males the pain body comes up, particularly when they drink too much, and so they lose their level of consciousness that they normally have, which may not be that high even at the best of times, but when they get drunk it goes down considerably, and so often violence is associated with being drunk. Perhaps 10% of men, they become physically violent when they become unconscious through alcohol. And they do dreadful things, and then when they're sober again, how could I have done such a thing? I don't know what came over me. And some have that cycle with their partner, physically abusive. And so, of course, when they're a little bit more conscious, they always promise, this is the last time. It won't happen again. No, that's not the pain body speaking. That's them speaking when there's a little bit more consciousness. And of course, it will happen again. Unless presence truly comes into their lives. So in some cases, you may have to physically remove yourself from a destructive pain body if change otherwise is not happening or would take too long. You would not survive 2 more years with that person, perhaps. In that case, you cannot stay around. It would be too dangerous. That person will then go his or her own way and evolve in their own time. So pain body meets presence, shrinks back, then waits for a better opportunity. But as presence arises, there's even the possibility that you could detect an active pain body in you, even in the midst of it. Even in the midst of it, it is possible to wake up and suddenly realize what's happening. You are acting out old emotional pain. And at that moment, there happens a dissociation between that entire emotional field and yourself. It's like stepping out of a role, out of an energy field. You were in it, and suddenly you step out of that phantom self. You step out, and there you see it. It's still there, active, still in you, still doing what it does. Maybe still you're waving your arms about or whatever it is, and at that moment there may still be words coming out of your mouth. You. And at that moment you see it. Oh. And then it cannot last very much longer, at least not right there. It doesn't mean it's gone forever, but then it will quickly shrink again back. Consciousness and pain body cannot coexist for long. And every time you bring presence to it, the pain body cannot renew itself. So it can only play out its old energy. The more you can be present with it, the less can it use you to renew itself. And so what happens then to the pain body? The energy becomes freed that was trapped in there. And many people carry so much pain that they can't do much else in their lives, that absorbs so much of their aliveness that they have little left to live their life. The emotional pain, and this is in the case of dense pain bodies, the emotional pain is so much that it consumes them. It's like a parasite. It consumes them, or their aliveness. And as you bring consciousness to it, that trapped energy becomes freed. It was trapped at a low frequency. If you could hear it, something like that. You wouldn't want to listen to a radio station for too long like that. And so that becomes freed, but it is life energy. It is aliveness ultimately. And there's an increasing sense of aliveness that you feel because the energy leaves its trap in the pain body. I sometimes compare it to a piece of heavy wood that's being burned. Or coal. The coal is transmuted into fire, the flame of consciousness. First it was dark and heavy substance, And suddenly the dark and heavy substance burns and becomes a flame. It becomes a transmutation into pure energy. Beautiful. And that is the beauty of it, why ultimately whatever is fine as it is. Or even the human pain body has a function, and that is that it provides fuel for consciousness, the pain. Ultimately, it becomes your spiritual teacher, one of your spiritual teachers. And for some people, their main spiritual teacher. I'd say for me, it was my main spiritual teacher, because I couldn't live with him any longer. So I couldn't live with myself any longer, and a large part of myself, when that realization came to me as a thought, I cannot live with myself any longer. A large part of who I felt myself to be consisted of emotional pain. And that just became unbearable. And that's why I'm here now. So the mechanism there of ultimately what is ego-induced pain, pain induced through unconscious living, through ego, pain body. Egoic living creates pain, suffering. It even needs the continuation of pain, because the ego and the pain body, they both need conflict, they both need further pain. The ego needs it to define itself through the other, the enemy, the not me. It needs the boundary around itself. It needs to create opposition in order to feel itself. It needs somebody to disagree with me, for example, so that I can feel that I'm right, he's wrong. And in being right, the delusion of who I am grows a little bit. So I need that. If everybody agrees with me, I would begin to lose my artificial sense of self, my mind-made sense of self. Often the collective identity that is in certain religions largely consists of the unbelievers, those who are not us, give us our identity. We define ourselves through those unbelievers. They give us our sense of who we are. Now, if suddenly they all became believers, we would be at a loss. Who are we now? They are all in possession of the truth now, so we lose our identity as the I am that. And he had a stall in Bombay selling handmade cigarettes. One would have thought, this is not very good karma, you're making other people ill. And he smoked quite heavily, apparently. And he just visited a guru, a teacher, who said, well, just remember that you are consciousness. Just be aware of the I am. In whatever you do, feel yourself as consciousness. Oh, okay. And then he went off back to his daily business, and he applied. Can we call that a technique? It's too simple to be called a technique. All he remembered is, I'm consciousness. And he's attempted to feel the I, the deeper I that underlies all experiences, awareness itself. And a few years later, it had emerged fully. It didn't come all at once, but it didn't take very long. And then suddenly he started speaking wisdom. A cigarette seller, almost illiterate, suddenly people would come and ask him questions, and intensely alive and wise answers came out of his mouth. Something had come through the form, and so The cigarette seller became Nisargadatta Maharaj. In India they like giving people names. Maharaj means the great king, spiritually of course. So this is a teacher to whom it came not suddenly, although it didn't take very long, but after a few years it became a continuous living presence. Presence was continuous in him. Now, as it is becoming a more widespread phenomenon, and this is happening, many people experience at first as a lessening of suffering, a considerable lessening of suffering in their lives. They can breathe, there's some space. There may still be drama occasionally, but there's space also. To many people it is coming gradually, and to others it is coming in an accelerated form. In this culture, these days, it often happens through an illness, AIDS, cancer. And I know quite a few to whom it came in that way, and I could see, and I told them, you are on an accelerated course. What otherwise probably would have taken much, much longer is happening now through your illness that is forcing you into presence. And others don't need an illness. It's happening. I cannot tell you whether you're better off with an illness or without it. If you choose presence, and this is only a limited perspective, it's not the ultimate truth, then it's less likely that you'll need to be hit over the head in order to crack the remaining shell. If you die to the past every moment and return to just the freshness of this. Don't carry personal past, the past in relationships, the past that you have with people. Yesterday they said that or whatever. Meet a person as if for the first time. Look at them and be there as a presence, not as a heavy personal past. Be the attention that is looking at them, because that's what you are. Be the consciousness that flows through your eyes as you look at them and listen to them. You are that. And then the beautiful expression in the Course in Miracles that is used for the present moment is the holy instant. To realize the only place that is sacred in life is this moment. If you only pay attention to it, you notice the sacredness of whatever form it takes, even if it looks horrible at first, because what looks horrible at first will be some kind of death, some kind of breaking down, and there also is sacredness. We already pointed to that, particularly there. No. How can I get over or release the outrage I, among others, feel about the political situation in the United States? Bush and his policies, which led to the invasion of Iraq, the dismantlement of the US social services and civil liberties. Should I really let go, release this outrage? Outrage, I assume, is a kind of anger. There are many places where you can look in this world. Countries, places, institutions, governments, and you see varying degrees of human unconsciousness at work. Wherever you look, you see the manifestation of human unconsciousness. Unconsciousness, of course, I'm not saying that they are totally they are identified with the mind and the old patterns of the mind, the collective ego. And wherever you look still, you see it, because the change that is happening in humanity, to a large extent, is on the inner. It only slowly reaches the outer levels where you can actually detect it. It takes a while before it reaches an institution, before it reaches a politician, before it reaches somebody in a position of power, but occasionally it already happens. Russia had a relatively enlightened human being after having had succession of leaders who seemed, you didn't even know whether they were alive or dead when you saw them, when they were having their and there was actually speculation. There was. Is whoever, Brezhnev or whoever the names were, is he still alive, or did they just put a puppet there that went? And some others speculated that it was an actor acting, because they didn't dare say that he had died, so they gave an actor the role to play. And this maybe have been true, we don't know. And that's one form of unconsciousness, and the structure of that regime was started from an ideal. The mind saw something beautiful. We must have equality, no personal possessions. But nothing had changed in the human mind. The structures were still in place, so we got that instead. And then suddenly there was Gorbachev, who compared to the previous leaders was a Buddha in consciousness. I remember once a remark he made on television when he was still president. They asked, there was a little scandal about some Western spies and Eastern spies had been thrown out of the country, the usual thing. And what about this scandal about the Russian spies in the Russian embassy? And he said, well, as the wise man said, this too will pass. And it did. However, it is rare for this shift that is happening in human consciousness to reach the outer forms, the institutions, the political, the government, the institutions, whatever it may be, the outer forms, businesses, the way businesses are run, companies. In most cases, they're dominated still by the old egoic consciousness. And I've spoken to some people who are who work in corporations, who say there's so much infighting and useless power struggles going on within the corporation, it's a miracle that anything gets done at all. And everybody lives in fear and they're not happy. So wherever you look in the world, you will find still on the surface of things varying degrees of unconsciousness. And only occasionally something else comes through already here and there. It does. Even on television, sometimes you see it. You see there's a conscious being speaking, or a film that has a message pointing to conscious awareness, or pointing to stillness. It happens. Maybe it happens more now. It's happening more. It's always wonderful. I love it when I see a film that points to the truth, and there are quite a few now. Not the majority yet, of course. But there are so many things that you could feel angry about if you personalize human unconsciousness. If you make it into an identity, then you say, these dreadful bastards, look what they are doing. It's human unconsciousness. Jesus saw it clearly when he said, they know not what they do. In other words, they are unconscious. And so a country sometimes also can vary. A country can be pulled into unconsciousness to some extent by an unconscious leader. Germany is a best example of what happened there. A country that, compared to others on the planet, was one of the most highly developed, cultured, scientifically, literature, culture, philosophy, music, and all that to no avail. They dropped right down into unconsciousness. Back. But this wouldn't have happened if there had not been a strong, enormous amount of collective pain body still in the country, and an enormous amount of collective ego, despite the so-called cultural achievements. So when you see it as unconsciousness, you're less likely to feel angry about it, because anger does not really fulfill a very useful purpose. It doesn't really change things. It contributes more. You're being pulled into unconsciousness through anger. You become unconscious yourself. See it for what it is. And then the next step is, what can you do? You have to accept that this is so, which does not mean there's nothing you can do. Once you have accepted that there's still a considerable amount of unconsciousness here on the planet, wherever you see it, wherever you feel it's mostly, you feel called upon to do something in this or that area. It could be the destruction of nature. It could be the polluting of oceans and rivers. It could be on the political scene, American politics, other politics, Middle East. Great focal point of unconsciousness. It's just look at the situation there. There's no stop, no pause to the fighting between the two. And they're both victims of the other. And they're both totally convinced that they're victims of the other. So when you see it, then you can point out certain things. Write, speak to people, have a website that says the truth about such and such, so and so, and just state the facts that as they are. This is how it is. If you want to, you can stand at a street corner and hold up something, a sign. a few people may start talking to you. They are more likely to listen if you are not angry, but simply explain, look, this is how it is. They are more likely to watch your website if it doesn't have the screaming anger about it. You're not convincing anybody who has the opposite view to yours, who says Bush is the greatest leader that has happened to America in a long time. You're not going to convince them with your anger that you are right. Their own position will become more entrenched. And so if you're right, then state the facts. This is how it is. Explain. If you can see the futility of anger, it's more likely to drop away. And there's something more powerful then. You can speak with passion, without anger, but passion, about what you feel is true. Be aware, very careful with identifying with mental positions, though, when you do that. Identifying with a position as me or us against. Be very careful with making wrong others, groups of people or individuals, because it draws you back into unconsciousness. Don't personalize it in that way. When doing projects of any sort, large or small, I find I must keep my intent fiercely in mind, or I end up doing something else. By employing this fierce focus, am I actually being counterproductive in the long run or in the big picture? The focus, when you have a project that needs to be done, finished. Now, the questioner is saying, keeping my intent fiercely in mind. Now, the intent, I assume, is where you want to get to, the finished project, the point that you want to arrive at to get it done. So my intent is getting to that point where the project is finished. My intent is drawing up a plan, a business plan, or the architect does a building, draws up a huge high-rise office building, or whatever, or there may be a project of any kind that you need to finish. There's the intent, and that's very much, I compare it to a journey. When you're traveling from here to there, maybe you're walking, let's say the rudimentary form, the early form of journeying, of being on a pilgrimage or journeying. Tourists didn't exist at that time. It was unknown. The people would journey because they had to leave their country, or they went on some kind of army expedition or pilgrimage, spiritual journey. That was perhaps the most common journey that individuals would undertake, is pilgrimage. You know where you need to go. The question is, what is it that takes up most of your attention? The place that you need to get to, or the step you're taking at this moment? What's more important? Now, in many cases these days, what people are obsessed with is the outcome, where they need to get to, and that causes the stress. I need to get this done, finished, over with. And I'm on a limited time scale here. Can't waste any minute. It needs to get done. So there's an excessive projection to the finished end product, the point in the future that I need to get to. And then the doing itself, it is done in a hurried way. A rest, there's the energy. Okay, come on. What's the next? Next. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Let's say you have to complete something that you manufacture with your hands. But this thing has to be ready by tomorrow. The world is mad these days. It always tells you that you have no time. You have to do it by tomorrow. And so you become excessively focused on tomorrow. I have to get the finished product. Or you're thinking that I can sell this. When it's finished, I can sell it. So it's done quickly with the end in mind. The end takes over your mind, occupies your mind more than the present moment, and you reduce the present moment to a means to an end. That's how a lot of doing happens these days. And all that doing is of low quality. Any doing that reduces this moment to a means to an end to a future moment is not high quality doing. And you can observe that when you observe how a person works, whether they are totally attentive, give total attention to whatever they are doing at this moment, which does not mean that they don't know where they are going to in their project. That is peripherally in their field of attention. The point they want to get to is peripherally in their field of attention, like a traveler who is walking towards Rome, let's say, and they are taking this step and are fully conscious of each step they are taking, but peripherally they know where they are going. It's over there. It's a long way away, but they know it's over there. So the focal point of there is the quality of your step at this moment, because if you're not careful, you'll stumble, you'll never get to Rome. The quality of each step is what matters, and the getting is secondary. It is on the periphery. You have the goal in mind also, but no, it does not occupy your mind. It does not overpower you. And so then the present moment is not a means to an end. You give your full attention to this moment. I have seen a few, not many, and some of them are highly so-called effective and successful people who did not become successful through strain and stress. Some did, and they are very unhappy and won't be around for long. But I have observed a few who, whoever they meet, whoever they talk to, or whatever is presented to them, they are totally there with it. If you come to them and ask them a question, they may be high up, so to speak, in social terms, the CEO of this or that corporation, and somebody comes to them, and there are a few, not many, who will give you total attention, no matter who you are. And that is wonderful. Everybody loves doing what they tell them to do because they feel so valued, because attention is the greatest gift you can give. Full attention. You're acknowledging that human being beyond the roles that they play in the world. So they're giving everything their fullest attention, and they are extremely effective at what they do. Others look as if they were effective, but everything they do is contaminated with extremely stressful, raw energy that is really a form of suffering. And they spread unhappiness. So it is possible to work effectively, in fact more effectively, by focusing on what it is at hand here, right now, to do, without losing in your peripheral vision the place you need to get to. That remains. Here, there. One step, Rome is there, but this step is here, and this step is more important. Whenever you see any work of quality that's been made by a human being, it means some attention must have gone into it, some human attention. Somewhere there must have been someone who did not reduce the moment in which that was being made to a means to an end, where it gave So you have works of art that have that quality, handicraft, things made by artisans in the original way, not under stress of having to produce. Because attention is also loving care. Another aspect of attention is whatever you give attention to, there is a loving care that flows into the doing. So if you give attention to a human being that comes into the now, the field of now, and this is so beautiful, to give each human being that comes into your field of vision to you with this or that demand or question or whatever it may be, give them full and complete attention. That doesn't mean you get drawn into their story. You don't give attention necessarily to their mind stream and energize that. You simply give attention. There's a spaciousness. There is, and if you can feel your presence, it's not your presence, it's just a way of speaking. Because it's intimately you, that's why I call it your presence. You are presence. Language always creates a separation, but that's how it is. Feeling yourself as your own presence. If then any question survives in your head, you could either ask it or wait for the answer within yourself. And when you're present within, non-vital questions won't survive in the head. They're recognized as not truly alive. Abstract. In medieval times, the mind created abstractions. How many angels can dance on the head of a needle, or something like that? Or abstractions that created the religions, not the original creator, but subsequent developments. The church split into two, I can't remember when, 1,500 years ago, over the dispute whether the Holy Spirit emanated from the Father or also from the Son. Getting lost in thought. And they could kill you if you didn't agree with them. So, vital question concerns you. Perhaps your suffering, if there is any left. Pain body questions are usually helpful to everybody. I don't mean questions that are asked by the pain body. They would be very angry questions. But questions concerning what you have observed in yourself, or maybe someone very close to you. Occasionally you get questions asked by the pain body. In one group we were talking about the pain body, an active pain body. If there's a pain body in any member of the audience who is at that moment active, that doesn't feel good, because the pain body doesn't like to be looked at. So occasionally it happens that somebody runs out of the room when we talk about the pain body, and they're not going to the toilet. And in one group we talked about the pain body, and an angry voice in the back said, "I have a question. When do we start meditating?"
Yesterday I experienced during the meditation a shifting between anxiety and somewhat fear and fearlessness. I realized that I was going deeper into a problem that I also face in my everyday life. Sometimes I get this anxiety, seems to coming out of nowhere, and sometimes I feel absolutely nearly fearless for even very difficult situations. So I hope that you could give me some truth about that, and also how I can work with it in daily life when I experience it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fear, the universal condition. Virtually everyone, unless they are very deeply rooted within, experiences some form of fear. There are different forms of fear. Anxiety, even stress is a form of fear. Stress of, I'm not going to get there in time. Nervousness, and more extreme forms, up to panic, dread. Most pain bodies contain, I would say really every pain body contains fear as part of its makeup. But fear is not always immediately recognizable as fear. Fear can shift and be translated into something that looks very different. For example, anger. If you look behind anger, you'll always find fear. I saw a little puppy at a dog training class that I attended with our with our dog, and there was all the puppies were running around playing, and then a new one came in whose behavior was clearly dysfunctional. You could see how aggression and fear go together. He would always run into a corner, and then if any dog came up to him, he would suddenly become aggressive and try to bite. And you can see, fear and anger, they go together, even in an animal. An animal is not really anger, but something almost like anger. So in everyone there is residual fear, no matter what your thoughts are, or even if you're free of thought, it can still be there, and that is part of the stored up old emotion of fear. Then there is the fear that is created by certain types of thinking. Any type of future thinking my life situation or my problematic situation, even one thought coming into your head about your problematic future, and if anybody's future is not problematic, I'd like to get to know that person. And very uncertain. Anything could happen to me. So, of course, when you project yourself into future, you immediately meet the uncertainty, the complete uncertainty. You could lose something very important to you, including your body. So, new fear is created through not being present, because in the present moment, there's usually nothing to fear. You can usually check that for yourself. Most fear is created through leaving the present moment mentally, projecting yourself into a possible future, which doesn't look good. Hope is the opposite of that. You project a future where things are going to get better. And then a hope thought can quickly shift into maybe it's not going to work out. And so you can experience almost the same thought that gives you hope for a moment while you lie in bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. And then, yeah, that'll get better, that'll happen. And then it shifts, it flips. Oh, maybe it won't happen. I won't get that. And fear immediately comes. The gap between, I believe it was Fritz Perls, the founder of Gestalt therapy, who said, anxiety is in the gap between now and then. Of course, that is the... So we have that's a mind-created gap. And the mind, which is compulsion to move into the future, creates a continuous undercurrent of fear. It tries to control the future. It can't. And so it's fearful. It tries to cope with the future. An imagined situation, you can't. You don't have the resource to cope with the future. Nobody does, because it doesn't even exist. So life does not give you the resource to cope with the future. The strength, or whatever knowledge you need, the insight, the realization, the strength, the energy, future doesn't exist, so you can't cope with it. And people have piled up in their mind a sequence of things that are problematic. Could go wrong, might not happen, should happen, but might add so. And then, of course, you can't cope with the future, it doesn't exist. You can always cope with this moment. This moment is always simple. If it's an emergency, it's very likely you don't even have time for fear. If it's an emergency, you will be forced into presence. And you will do something without needing to think. Something else takes over. Some people have experienced that when accidents were about to happen. Suddenly an inner shift occurred. All fear was there initially, and then suddenly, just as it was about to happen, all fear left them. There were many reports, and there was a sense of peace and intense aliveness. And out of that, if action was possible, action came. So, are you adding to the residual fear that is still in you? That's question one. Am I adding to the fear by identifying with some kind of thought about the future? Or it could be a thought about somebody else that I feel close to and whose actions and whose life I cannot control, who may be getting into all kinds of impossible situations. It could be a child and grown-up child or teenage child. could be anybody else close to you you don't know where they are and what they're doing. You know they're engaged in dangerous activities. And so many parents have the need to control the lives of their children. They want to protect them from possible harm. And even after they're grown up, they get extremely worried about what they're into. And yet, what they want to spare them, suffering. And now, if you could truly do that, if you were omnipotent, and you could spare your child, or the grown-up child, suffering, there would be no development in the child whatsoever. Up to a point, the deepening in a human being happens through suffering. The arising of consciousness happens through suffering, through making mistakes. The most unprofitable life would be a life in which no mistakes were made. It's impossible, but only theoretically possible. So suffering is the spiritual teacher until you reach the point where you are now, where you suddenly realize, I don't need suffering anymore, because you choose presence. Up to that point, you have to be pushed into presence by life, which is consciousness, through suffering. Most of it is self-created. That's how it works. You can help, of course, as much as you can, you help. Very young child, you have to prevent from getting too close to the window or whatever it is, all those things, practical things. But beyond the practical, you have to allow other humans to make mistakes, to do what they feel is right to do, even if you know very well this is wrong and will lead to suffering, instead of lying awake all night worrying about what they are doing. There's nothing you can do. So, the fear can arise because you have thoughts about somebody close to you or yourself. So that is the fear that is created now, through future projection. And when there's enough presence in you, can recognize that as I'm creating fear. My mind is creating fearful thoughts. And you believe in every fearful thought. And then the corresponding emotion comes. Many people shake with fear in their warm bed in the middle of the night. To bring you back to reality, the reality test is the useful question that I may have mentioned before. You could put it on your bedside table. What is the problem now? What is there to fear at this moment? Because if it's not now, where is it? And then you open your eyes, you look around the room or switch on the light. Where's the monster? Where is the dreadful event? In my head. And then there's the residual fear that you still carry. Even if your mind is not creating it, it may suddenly come up as an emotion. It could be the pain body. It could be an isolated emotion, perhaps drifting up from the pain body. And you are not even thinking about future, and it can come in meditation. It often does, because meditation is going deeper into yourself. And what the ego fears most is its own end. It fears your presence. So when there's a letting go into the present moment, a relaxing, the tightness, the contraction with which the fear was being held down opens, and often what comes up is fear. It's the fear of the end of the egoic entity. The fear of the end of my problems, the fear of the end of me as a mind-made entity. So when it happens in meditation, fear rises. And now you need to observe whether it's created by a thought about future or whether it just seems to come by itself. If it's created by a thought, you can see the fallacy of the thought. It's not, it's about future. Then you don't believe in the thought anymore, and you bring attention back into the body or to your breath, and then the fear also goes. But if it's not associated with the thought and it suddenly comes up, what do? It is what is at this moment. So you feel it fully, instead of thinking about it. Instead of thinking, how can I get rid of this? Or what can I do about it? Or I don't want to feel this. Are you arguing with the present moment? What is at this moment inside you. And if there's a quiver of fear, that's what is. And you bring attention to it. Say, there is the fear. And then you don't say anything anymore. You simply allow it to be there. It doesn't feel pleasant, but it won't kill you. It has killed some people, but not people who were aware of it and allowed it to be, but people who were totally identified with it, completely identified with that emotion. Then it could kill you. But if you are aware of it and allow it to be as it is, and notice it's not going to kill me, it may not feel pleasant, it's like feeling almost a physical feeling of unwellness. There it is, and you feel it. And you may sometimes feel that it wants to become thoughts. The emotion wants to become thoughts, or the mind is attempting to explain the fear that you feel by creating some image that works the other way around. Sometimes the mind creates fear, but it's also the residual fear that is in you. Sometimes is the mind doesn't know what to do with it. Why do I feel fear? And then it creates some explanation or some image why you feel fear that works the other way around. So fear can be created by a fearful thought, but a fearful thought can also be created by the residual fear in you that's already there, that has been there for a long time. And that is often the case in dreams, where nightmares, when you feel intense fear in a dream. And you may believe that the image that you are dreaming is creating the fear. The monster that you're trying to get away from in the dream is creating the fear. The fear is the residual fear that lives in you, probably associated with the pain body, the bundle of emotions that have come together to form the pain body. So what you're experiencing is the residual fear, and the mind needs to somehow make sense of this. So it attempts to find an image to explain it. And in the dream it becomes a nightmare. In a very unconscious person, or in somebody in whom the fear is very intense, the fear in daily life can turn into so-called paranoia, which is a complete misperception of reality in which you see other people or groups of people as your enemies who want to do you harm. This is only a more pronounced form of the normal egoic state. The normal egoic state is very suspicious of other people. It wants to use them, it also fears them. It misinterprets very often their behavior. So there is element of paranoia in every ego. The fear of others, even the need to have enemies, to make them into enemies. And it's more pronounced than it's recognized as a form of insanity. But what is it? It is the mind's attempt to explain the intense fear that I feel. And therefore it cannot explain it, but the mind wants some explanation. So it creates a reality that seems to explain the continuous fear that I feel. A fearful reality. It doesn't know that the fear that you feel comes from the past. It's part of the pain body. There is no explanation here at the present moment for it. So it's an attempt of the mind to explain, and it becomes unreality. So the quickest way beyond fear, yes, detect if it's created by a thought. You can see the thought, and then you can drop the thought or your belief in the thought and come back to the present moment. Or the residual fear that is in you that wants to become thought too. And if possible, watch the fear as an energy that lives in you so that it doesn't turn into thinking. So you watch it directly. It doesn't feel good, but it's like it's bad weather inside. No more. So bad weather outside is not that bad. It's actually quite nice when you accept it. When the mind says this is dreadful weather, it's dreadful. But when you allow it to be, even so-called bad weather is quite beautiful. So you allow the fear to be as it is. You give it space to be, because that's the form that this moment takes. You give it space to be, and then you may notice the space around the fear, so to speak. It's almost a metaphorical way of putting it. The space around the fear gets bigger. And then you notice there's actually a vast space. The more you allow it, the more you become aware of space around it, inner space around the fear. The more there is a distance between you and the fear. And there's the fear, what before was overpowering, you didn't even want to look at it or feel it, suddenly is realized as a tiny energy movement compared to the vastness of space around it. And that happens when you allow it to be and watch it. It becomes transmuted. Even the residual fear from the past becomes transmuted. Be very much aware of the danger of the fear, the residual fear, influencing your thinking, controlling your thinking. You remember the two movements. When you are not very present, fear creates certain thoughts, fear thoughts. Or the other way, fear thoughts create fear. The residual fear creates also more thoughts when you're not very present. People talk about trusting in life. They say, how can I learn to trust in life? You can't learn to trust. And that's the great, if you observe a dog, which I've been doing more often recently, you realize they inhabit quite a different reality. It seems that 70% of their reality consists of smells. It's the first thing they go to, the first to find out about things and people, whoever is there, whatever is there. The first thing they go to is they smell it out. And then probably the next one is hearing, and the third one may be seeing. And many animals are like that, so they perceive the world differently. The predominant perception is smell, and there is a richness there that we could never even conceive of smells, of different smells. Humans can't, maybe we had it once, we can't retrieve that. We can be happy enough if we can smell the freshness in the air, the moisture of the, after a rain shower like yesterday, the moisture that rises from the ground. It smells, you smell the earth, the aliveness of it. So, as much as possible, step back out of the story, which is there anyway. It is unfolding. Between past and future unfolds the story of me. Between past and future, there's the movement of time that eventually consumes you as that form, does something to you like some dreadful disease, the flux of time. Eventually you shrink and get old, and you wither, and it looks as if everybody were in the grip of some disease. What is the name of the disease? What are you suffering from? Time. It's been diagnosed as fatal. It's only a question of time when it's going to end. Or as one man wrote to me the other day, he worked out mathematically, he had this image of somebody jumping off a inconceivably high cliff and then falling. And the fall takes 80 years or 85, it's the average age, before he or she hits bottom. And he works out how many kilometers he falls in 80 years. I don't remember the figure. But as far as the form is concerned, that includes your story, it's destined to hit the ground eventually. And all problems are suddenly solved. But there's more to who you are, fortunately. And everybody deep down knows that that is not all, otherwise they would all be jumping out of the windows already. What's the point? And even to be aware of how fleeting all that is on the level of form, even to observe that and to acknowledge that and to see that, wow, this is amazing. That is already a spiritual thing to do. The simple awareness of mortality, the awareness of impermanence, the awareness of the fleetingness of all forms, there's already a spiritual dimension present. So you can watch a film. I saw a film recently whose main subject matter seemed to be death. It was about 3 women in different ages living on a novelist, on a contemporary woman who is reading a novel. I can't remember the details. But it was basically about impermanence and death. And some people say this film is depressing. No, if you truly see it, it's already spiritual. Anything that puts you there as a witness of the impermanence of things, and some films can do that, or some works of literature do that. And when you are there as the witness of that, without even ever having to say or think about anything else, the spiritual has already arisen in you. Because it's the awareness that is formless. The formless in you is the aware presence that is aware of the short-lived nature of all forms. That's why the contemplation of death ultimately is already a spiritual thing, when you allow it to be. Of course, on one level, something in you says, oh, ooh, ooh. And when you imagine yourself that you're in free fall and you don't know how many thousands of kilometers you're away from the bottom. Nobody knows. Ooh. And yet when you contemplate that, it's almost liberating to see it's all relatively insignificant, because it's all destined to dissolve quite soon. And then the entire world becomes only relatively important. It loses its heaviness, because it's all smoke. It's all like clouds, temporary formations. And clouds are very temporary. If you watch a cloud, it has one shape one moment and then a different shape, and then it's gone. So as much as possible, step out of the conceptual world, past, future, forms, all that which is destined to dissolve soon anyway. Go into the immediacy of sense perception. Yes, whatever you are hearing, touching, smelling, seeing, whatever. Of course, that also is short-lived. And yet, the awareness, the presence that enables you to perceive is the formless within the form that you perceive. The attention, the alertness. So in every sense perception there's hiding something that is deeper than the perception. We mentioned that even in a dream that looks unreal, there must be something real, otherwise how could the dream be? There must be something there. And of course, yes, it's the consciousness in which the dream happens. And the question, is the world real or unreal, should not be asked on an intellectual level. That will just lead to a lot of philosophy with no final answer or beliefs. Your own life, what is real about my life ultimately? Is there anything real about my life? Or what do I know for sure? Descartes, the philosopher, he asked that question. What is it that I can know for sure? He never stopped thinking, and so he thought it's thinking, that I'm always thinking. But if he had gone a step deeper, he would have realized the sense of beingness or presence that is deeper than thinking. The question that you are is beyond doubt. You can doubt anything, but you cannot doubt that you are. It's life itself. I don't know what I am, the form may be short-lived, but the fact that there is something here that knows that the form is short-lived, there's no doubt that that has reality. There is something in you that is. There's no doubt about that. I am, that I know. What I am, I don't know. I appear as a body for a while, and perhaps I appear as a flower, I appear as whatever form. Perhaps the I am is in every form. What I am is the one I am. That thing that is beyond doubt, that my own being, the beingness that is here, of course it is. It's the life that I am is beyond doubt. And could that be the same life and the same being and the same I am that is in every form of life? The formless essence of all life. And so if you can be aware that you are aware, aware that you are, then that's enough. Aware of being, of presence. Presence being self-aware through you. You are it. And then what you are is the temporary roles that you, disguises that you go into. I'm a successful businessman for a while, until you hit the ground, or the stock market collapses. Then the psychological entity hits bottom before the physical entity hits the bottom. I'm a failed writer, whatever, another concept in the head. I'm somebody who's missed out on life. Life passed me by. Where is life? Here, now. It passed me by. It's long since gone. Didn't give me what I needed. So stepping out of the story, the structural aspect of your form life, life in form, as much as possible, then you access something that is deeper than past and future, than the form, than that which dies, yourself. And the temptation of the world is, it pretends that that's all that matters. Matter is all that matters. This is important. Thought. So it's a continuous, for a while, waking up out of being totally identified with the structural aspect of your life, the story of me, where it's coming from and where it's going, and giving an ultimate importance to that. Relative importance, yes, you do what you can now, can only do it now, can only do at this moment what I can do at this moment, can't go beyond that. Past and future lose their heaviness. And the new comes in, something that is fresh and new is always present. You remain fresh and new, like a day that's just like today, this morning. No past. Absolute presence. And if you carry past into that perception, it becomes obscured. It even disappears. And the morning is no longer fresh, and you are no longer fresh and alive. And the longer you live identified with form and with your story, the more burdensome it gets, and the world feels stale and old and weary. Expressed in a character, I believe, in Shakespeare, maybe it's Hamlet who is considering killing himself. How weary, stale, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Weary, stale, like bread that has become stale. Weary, stale, and unprofitable, meaning pointless, useless. That's how it becomes. You don't want to end up there. And part of that is not reducing the magnificence of this moment, the depth and the aliveness of this moment, that's all you ever have, to a means to an end, which is the story. Make it just into a stepping stone so that I can reach the next chapter, the next paragraph in the cheap fiction of my story, of me. Absurd. So that simple thing, bring the alertness, wake up, become aware of sense perceptions, and that which underlies every sense perception, yourself, the perceiver, the perceiving consciousness, the attention, in which there's no tension. And sensing the inner body, the aliveness that is there. And becoming alert to this moment. It's no longer a means to an end, it has a depth to it that is sufficient unto itself. And you to know that, you don't need to sit still. You may be sitting still, but it's not necessary to sit still. You can be involved in movement and be fully present in the movement of your life. Fast movement, slow movement. Be fully present in the movement. Enjoy the energy movement of this and be there also as the witness of it, and yet you are doing what you have to do. No, you're not in a hurry. This is why you can do something fast if you have to. You may be doing less things if you're no longer living in the mad hyperactivity of the human mind. Perhaps there are fewer things that you need to do really fast. But occasionally, it is called for. You may have to move fast. And you're totally present in the movement, enjoying that without needing to arrive at the next moment. This moment is good enough. I'm running to catch the train. It's good. It feels good. And then you miss it. Oh. At least you enjoyed yourself. That's why I have in Zen another famous saying, hurry slowly. Hurry is maybe fast on the external. Slow means the stillness remains inside, even though you're fast on the external. So if you have to, you can be very fast. You look at martial arts, they can be, if they have to be fast, they're very fast. Without losing the rootedness in being. So it doesn't pull you out of being. And then when you sit quietly in your room, the dynamic aspect of being remains. The stillness is also dynamic in you, which means you don't go to sleep. When you sit quietly in your room, the stillness remains vibrantly alive. So in the stillness there is a vibrancy, and in the external activity there's also a stillness. So you have the two polarities. Or as I sometimes call it, Buddha and Clint Eastwood character. And the present moment, just all that would be enough. Not remembering it's not a means to an end. give it fullest attention and enjoy it. Enjoy the doing. You can't enjoy the doing if the next moment is more important than this. Enjoy whatever it is that is required of you at this moment. The aliveness of it. The external is allowed deeply because it is, and then you go deeper than the form. So even if on the external it looks unpleasant, I'm wet and cold and it's windy and I want to get home. Okay, and then you bring a yes to it. As we talked yesterday, you become a duck or wet poodle or whatever it is. And the wet poodle is not complaining. He's just wet, and then he shakes, and nobody says, oh, it's cold and wet. There's no judging entity there. It is as it is, says the dog, if he could speak. Be present in every movement. You can live like that. And just to try a slow movement and be present is a beautiful thing to do, just because it's not a means to an end. When this arm is here, it's not trying to get there. It's just here, and it's just here, and just here, and just here, and just here, and just here, here. Not I'm trying to get there. Here. Beautiful. So you can do that either by practicing Tai Chi or Kim's movement practice called Kim Fu Chi. Which a few years ago I saw her performing spontaneously for the first time at a retreat. I said, what is happening? It's simply presence expressing itself as joyful movement. And there was a slow kind of dance, and I saw her doing it, and I said, where does that come from? It came out of presence, the joyful expression of presence. And in that moment I thought maybe what I'm witnessing is the early origin of Tai Chi. Perhaps that's how it started, with someone allowing him or herself to express spontaneously the state of presence in movement. Some people believe that Tai Chi originated when people observed the movement of animals and tried to imitate that. But I believe it was a spontaneous expression of presence. Although, of course, if you watch animals, you see a certain similarity between that being present in every movement and, for example, the movements of a cat walking. Amazing to watch that. That is Tai Chi too. They are not in a hurry, just present. They just watch, and when they watch, they just watch. They're not thinking about what's going on there. They know what's going on without having to conceptualize it, and then movement continues. And suddenly there's an energy built up, and they jump. You could never think that a thing could jump that high. It's almost magic. And then they're still again. You could spend hours watching. So if you practice movement, it's a beautiful way of learning to be, not to make this moment into a means to an end. Just a simple movement. Because in the ordinary consciousness, every movement, through it you want to get somewhere. That's more important. So just, it could be spontaneous, it could be a sequence that you follow, but the important thing is, this is this presence at every step. And if you are disabled and can't move very well, it would be enough to move your hands. Dance with your hands. And you can make some activity into a movement that is present, a dance, wiping a table, cleaning your shoes, doing this or that, putting on a shirt. And whenever that happens, there's a gap in the continuity between past and future in your life. There is a gap in your life in the story of me, of presence, a gap of presence. And the more gaps of presence you have, the more alive you are. Does the story suffer? Can you no longer continue writing that fiction of me? No, you can. But it'll become literature. Your life from pure, cheap fiction, soap. If you pay attention to empty space instead of paying attention to the little that's there in the empty space, and talk about that, but acknowledge, be aware of the empty space, which you can only do through the empty space within yourself. To be aware of the empty space, either the space in the music or the space in the painting, the emptiness there, to acknowledge it, to be aware of it, is through that within yourself, never through thought. Because the empty space is the formless, thought is form. And the formless is your essence identity. And then of course you have a temporary form identity, physical, psychological form. But only knowing yourself as the form identity is bondage, is ignorance, is delusion, no matter how clever the form identity is, no matter how much knowledge the form identity has, no matter how many experiences the form identity has accumulated and identifies with as me. It is ignorance only to know yourself as the form, physical body, mental form, psychological form of me, the mind-made image, me. And then, in the truest sense of the word, you don't know who you are. And who you think you are is an illusory entity. And because it's illusory, it's never at ease. You can never be yourself through the illusory entity. And then the illusory entity seeks, because it knows its own incompleteness and lack, and then it seeks to strengthen the illusion. It seeks to add more to the illusion, believing by adding more to the illusion, finally you arrive at something substantial and true and permanent and lasting, beyond decay. And you never find it, because you don't know yourself as the formless. So we are here to know ourselves as the formless. And in any situation, as you move about this world, which is the world of form, the world will exert its pull upon you. In any interaction with another human being, the question is there space in the interaction? Or is the interaction entirely through form, mind? And I'm sometimes surprised, sometimes people who are already able to allow that stillness that is intrinsically one with the formless to arise. When they get challenged by the world, they get totally drawn into whatever form the challenge takes and the reaction takes. They get immediately lost and believe that something out here, or in their minds, which is also out here, they believe that something out here matters, is vitally important. And so the world seduces you, that includes of course the mind, the world seduces you into believing that this matters absolutely and you must give me your total attention. And so you get lost in your reaction, which is also a form, a conditioned form, and you are totally in it. And then you are talking to someone. It's very serious, very serious. You must listen to me. This is what happened, and now what are we going to do about it? Or there's fear. Oh my God, what's going to? This is right. It's all. Your whole self is drawn into space is lost, and all you have is form. So that means you get lost completely in the form. And this is when the whole civilization is lost in that. When you listen to the news, there's no sense of space. The newsreader is very serious and reads out all these things that matter so much, and everything is very problematic, because if it's not problematic, it doesn't reach the news. It doesn't need to be deep or meaningful or whatever. No, it needs to be problematic. There must be something here that is news. So those people who are themselves lost in form, they select the news for you, and then it's presented as it matters. These problems are so important, and the potentially redeeming dimension, redemptive, redeeming, they don't know it. There's no space around it whatsoever. So you get seduced by the world into believing that that's all there is, and then the world becomes more important to you than God, to use theistic language. You might say, no, all I want is God's realization, whatever, liberation, self-realization. All I really want is that. And 5 minutes later, what you really want is this situation matters absolutely. You get drawn into that, and then, so the question is, when you say, I want God, self-realization, it's true. When you say it, it's true. But 5 minutes later, you don't want it anymore. You want the world. Because to say, I want God, means I'm willing to enter the surrendered state of consciousness. No, I'm willing to enter surrender. And nothing else matters. It's also saying, I want peace. And that is the only true thing that I want is peace. And a little later the world comes in, and then you want something else. In the text called The Course in Miracles, which was a channeled teaching, there are the beautiful lines, I want the peace of God. To say these words means nothing, is nothing, but to mean these words is everything. Nobody can mean these words and not be healed, which means, of course, not be whole, not be yourself. To truly want it. So we have the two. When you are not in the state of surrender, people say, I can't surrender. I can't. Is it that you can't, or that you're not willing? You have to look, there are two perspectives on the same thing. I'm not able, or perhaps if you look closely, there's something in you that doesn't want to surrender, that wants the non-peace. And to see that there is a movement in you that is very deep, that is true, that wants realization, wants peace. There's another movement in you that does not want it, and that can very easily obscure the deeper essence within yourself that wants peace. It's important to realize that there is a conditioned movement in you that wants problems and conflict rather than peace. Once you know it, it's fine, and once you can see it even as it comes up and operates, and that may include, of course, the pain body, but it is a conditioned mind movement that is one with the egoic sense of self, which periodically and very frequently needs to enter the state of conflict to sustain itself. The mind-made egoic self cannot live for very long without entering conflict and inhabiting a world of problems. It needs to create that to sustain itself. If you don't know that, you get lost in that compulsive need, which could also be called, in humans, the addiction to suffering in humans. And you need to see it within yourself, that is there, and it's not personal. If you think it's a personal problem of mine, then you get trapped even more deeply. The addiction to suffering, the need for conflict is unconscious, And it is how that separate identity, that is mine, the egoic identity, keeps its boundaries intact. The boundaries between me and all those others, all those out there, other people, my enemies in the form of people or situations or places, or this moment. So it occasionally you get a relief, and then for a little while you're and then the need, the addiction to suffering comes back, and when you don't know it, you believe that the world around you is making you suffer, is doing it to you. And that is the essence of unconsciousness. You then believe that the world is basically out to put obstacles in your path. This is how most people experience life and the universe. It seems like I can never be at peace for long, and suddenly the world putting obstacles in my way. It's happening again. God, why does it always have to happen to me? And then you react. So it looks as if the world were doing it to you. And you don't realize that that need comes from within. That's already dysfunctional, it's normal, and it's not personal. Then you take the dysfunction a little bit further, and then we can see that it's actually insane. The belief that the world is doing something to me becomes then paranoia or paranoid schizophrenia. And when you take it just a little bit further, then you can see, oh, it's actually quite mad. But even before it's diagnosed as paranoia, it's already mad. And so if you're diagnosed with paranoia, then you can tell yourself, just because you have paranoia doesn't mean they're not out to get you. So it is liberation already, it is liberating to see in oneself that movement that we could call the addiction to suffering, the need for conflict, to see it. That's already, you're becoming free in seeing it in yourself. Because the seeing, what you are seeing is the conditioned. That which sees the conditioned is the unconditioned that just looks. And so, you can see in your life how periodically, maybe once or twice or 3 times a day, or who knows what frequency, that comes in. And then any situation will do, and certain situations bring it up even more, that need. Many people coming here to a strange environment. India is challenging. So it is. You can watch what comes up, all the reactivity, the reactive patterns that come up, that bring a heaviness to something that is just a situation out there, and the reactivity flows in and becomes very heavy. The condition that is simply a condition becomes heavy through the reactivity. So that's important to know, and so all that implies there's no space when that happens. You get drawn totally into form, because when you react against something, you react against some form which strengthens your own form identity. That's the form identity loves its reactivity. So in any interaction, in any situation, the question is, are you lost in that situation? Which means lost in the mind formations, the reaction, the mind stream, the words that are coming out of your mouth.